Hey, thank you so much for joining us. We're talking about this unprecedented election in Caddo Parish. And I know you're not in Caddo Parish, you're in Bossier Parish, but have you heard or seen anything like this before?
Never. This is unusual, and the reason it's unusual because very seldom do you have a candidate that's going to win by exactly one vote. And automatically, as soon as we knew the results was one vote difference, we knew that was going to have to be a recount, and there may be possibly some litigation on that particular matter.
Wow. And so if this happened in Bossier Parish, there's a lot of allegations out there about what happened in Caddo Parish. Let's talk about the flaps. A lot of the flaps had an X on the signature line. A lot of people don't understand what an X means. Can you tell me that? And is it valid?
If a voter is registered and cannot sign his signature for whatever reason, we have some voters that are registered that may have an illness or disease, and as long as the witness that X, then we will count that ballot. As long as everything on that mail-in ballot is correct, and we know that that particular voter, his signature is going to be an X, then we will count that ballot.
Well, let's take this back a little bit to when there was slavery times, when people did not, like African Americans and minorities, did not have the chance or the ability to go to school, so they did not have a chance to read and write. Would this be an attack on minority communities because a lot of African American elderly people signed with an X?
That is correct. If someone decided that they were going to disqualify a voter because their signature was an X and everything else is on the ballot is witnessed correctly, then I think that would be an attack on that particular voter. And particularly regardless of the demographic of that voter, I believe it would be attack and disenfranchisement to that voting right to vote. Because we do have elderly individuals that have had strokes and other illness or diseases that are not able to sign their names, but they're still registered and eligible to vote.
Initially, the Nicholson camp said that they wanted a hand recount. Even if we went and did a hand recount after the mechanical or machine recount, would it be the same?
I think the numbers are going to be the same. As far as the Board of Election Supervisors, they're responsible for certifying all of the mail-in ballots and all of the early voting ballots. And then the machine recount, the state has to come in and pull those cartridges out of the marine machines to verify those votes that actually voted on election day at the machines. So only thing that the Board of Election Supervisors is responsible for are those early mail-in ballots and those early voting ballots to make sure they're accurate.
Now, there are some allegations that the machine voted twice.
That would be, in my opinion, only highly unlikely. The machine can't vote twice. If a voter votes twice, on the same machine, that means that that voter had to go to the precinct and sign that register book twice. There's a process to prevent any voter from voting twice. The only way I could see a voter voting twice is if a voter mailed in a ballot or early voted, and there's no way that early voter is going to be able to vote on election day. So the only way I could see that occurring is if the voter mailed in a ballot for whatever reason and then went to the polls on election day and the books did not get annotated correctly and that voter was allowed to vote early and vote on election day, in which case one of those votes should not count.
Okay, so there are allegations about the two people that voted twice. That's already happened. The flaps have already been torn on those absentee and they have gone to the precinct to vote. Okay, that's acknowledged. Is that a reason to throw out this election?
I don't think there's a reason to throw out that election. What we do is we discount that vote.
Can you go back and find that vote on the absentee if the flap has been torn?
The register of voters keeps every absentee ballot for verification. And so if there is a case where a candidate may have voted in person and then voted by a mail-in ballot or absentee ballot, then we can determine whether that happened. And if we determine that that happened, one of those votes are not going to count because you can't vote twice.
How do you know how they voted, though? Nobody knows how they voted. So if you throw it out, who are you throwing it out for?
When I say throwing out the particular vote, we're just going to throw out the vote. We're not going to look at who they voted for, everything. It's nothing they voted on is going to count. Only one of those ballots is going to count.
So
either the mail-in ballot is going to count or the machine ballot is going to count. One of those is going to have to be adjudicated and discarded.
So would you have to open it to see who they voted for?
You open every absentee ballot anyway. We don't know. We have a process called adjudication. So every absentee ballot that comes in, hit scan, and if everything is correct on that absentee ballot, then the machine records the vote. If there's a question on that mail-in ballot on whether that ballot is valid or not, we, the Board of Election Supervisors, we look at the ballot and we adjudicate it. We determine by majority vote whether that ballot and that vote should count. And we can discount the ballot, the entire ballot, or we can discount it. Let me give you an example. If a voter, say we had an election where there were multiple candidates on it, not just two candidates running, and the voter voted for two candidates or made a mark in both spots, and we cannot determine the intent of the voter, then we would not count that for that particular ballot at all. So that would be an undercount on that particular issue, whether it was a candidate for whatever particular office.
Yeah, I think that was an issue that came up when they were looking at some of the ones that were in question. And there was a signature by a circle, but the circle wasn't shaded. Should that count?
What we do is we try to be consistent in all of our policy. Sometimes the voter may fill out a ballot and make a mistake and say, that's not the candidate I wanted to vote for. And they may put an X through it. And most times they're initial and then they're circle in the other ballot. And what we typically will do as a board, we try to make sure we determine whether the voter intended to exit out. And sometimes voter will write in, this is not what I want. And they were circling other ballot and that other spot. And when they do that, we know what the intent is to the voter. If we cannot determine the intent of the voter, then we just don't count that vote at all.
Okay, then back to the machines. When I meant a double vote, the person in the irregularity on that particular precinct said they pressed to vote for a candidate and it seems like it voted twice. Is that possible with these machines?
Not the machines that we work with. And I've been a commissioner. I've been a commissioner in charge, and I've been over the Board of Election Supervisor for since 2015. And even as a commissioner and a commissioner in charge, I've never seen a machine where a voter was actually voted twice, because the machine is not set up that way. When you press that X, it's not going to allow you to vote for another candidate. You're going to have to cancel that X in order to vote for another candidate, the way the machine is set up. That would be an irregularity that I've not seen in all of the years that I've worked as a commissioner and a commissioner in charge and on the Board of Election Supervisors.
When we're talking about one vote, how do you pick up 3 votes on each side? Why wasn't that caught?
I'm not sure what happened in Caddo, why those 3 votes or additional votes were not caught. And I'm assuming that maybe they were a mail-in ballot, because I don't know. I have not seen any of the ballots from Caddo. I'm presuming that maybe they got some mail-in ballots or something that didn't get counted. When the mail-in ballots come in, they always have to be in the Friday before the election in order to be put in the system, be adjudicated by the Board of Election Supervisors. Only way I could see something happening is for some reason a ballot did not get put into the system.
What do you think is going to happen?
Unfortunately, I think this particular election is probably going to go to litigation, and then there may be an authorization to issue another election, but it's going to be costly. I'm more concerned on this particular election that we're talking about the election of sheriff or parish, but any election, and you got less than 30% of the voters that voted. I would be more concerned about why the voters didn't vote. I took a look at the early numbers, and the early numbers was in favor of Mr. Whitehorn for the early voting numbers, but on election day, we got the difference of 1 vote. So that meant more people came out and voted on election day than voted in the early voting, which I kind of suspected would happen because the rural parish, they're not going to come in town to vote. You only got 2 early voting sites. You vote downtown or you vote at the clerk of court's office. Mm-hmm. So most of the people that live outside they're not going to come in to early vote. Yeah. And so that kind of fell in line with what I thought. But I also thought that if the numbers was low for voter turnout, that those numbers would favor Mr. Nicholson.
Do you think that this is going to another election, or do you think the judge is going to say, no, it stands, Mr. Whitehorn is the sheriff-elect?
I really wish I could predict that. And what question I have is why they've done all of this, but I don't know if they've contacted the state board. The state has a board of election supervisors also that can review all of the election results. And so I don't know if they've ever contacted the state and asked the state board of election supervisor to take a look at this number. But there's a provision in the legislation where the state can also look at those numbers and see if they're valid without going to the courts.
If this goes to another election, what does it say about democracy, and what does it say about registrar of voters? Does it say that the registrar of voters can't do their job? The clerk of court can't do their job? The parish election supervisors didn't do a good job?
I don't think it's a reflection on the registrar of voters or the clerk of courts. We have individual commissioners that are working at the polls that sometimes, if they make a mistake, it is our responsibility to catch that error. But we have processes in place where every time someone mails in a ballot or early vote, we're supposed to make sure that we get that into the register book so that those that vote at the poll are not able to vote twice. Are we human, and can a mistake happen? It can. It shouldn't happen, because we're talking about the most basic of the democratic process. And our role is to ensure that every voter has the right to vote, that every vote is counted properly, and that the integrity of the system works. Because you don't want conspiracy theories or other people question any election. And there are a lot of conspiracy theories that go around, and people are trying to say people stealing votes. I've not seen how that works in our state because of those systems that we have in place to prevent that from working.
If this was over in Bossier, would you say that this needs to go to another election?
I'm going to be honest, I don't think we would make a mistake like that in Bossier. I think we have a system in place where the governor appointee has been there since 2010. I've been on the board of election supervisors since 2015, and our clerk and our registered voter have been there 2016. And I don't think we missed 3 elections among all of us together throughout. And I think we have a relationship where we are going to look at the intent of the voter, and our purpose is to make sure that every vote counts. What we don't want to do is we don't want to disenfranchise any voter, regardless of their demographic, regardless of their party affiliation. What we care about is the voter having an opportunity to vote and making sure that vote is their voice and their voice is heard.
Back in 2000 in Red River Parish, there was something very similar that I believe our station covered. I can't remember the name, but there was someone that won, and then it went to the trial court, and the trial court said, yes, the election is valid. It was appealed, and the appellate court says, nope, time to go back for a re-election. And then it was appealed to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and they said, no, the election was, I think they went and did a recount, and it ended up being that same person to win again. If we do a recount, is it going to be Nicholson or will it be Whitehorn? Because at this point, each side of the people that represent are fired up and saying, one, Whitehorn won, and we're going to make sure he stays in there, or Nicholson's side is saying, no, we feel that something went wrong. We're going to come out stronger to make sure that he wins.
The numbers are what the numbers are. If candidate Whitehorn won by 1 vote, he won the election. You know, let's look at the votes of all of the machine votes that were counted, all of the early vote and mail-in ballots that was counted, and let those votes determine who won. And I think when we get into the legalities of things and going to court, to me that creates a question in every voter's mind about the validity of not only this election, but any election. And I think those numbers are there, and I think we go with those numbers, and whoever wins. I mean, I'm glad that I'm not in Caddo because I don't have a dog in this particular hunt, but I do care about the integrity of every election. And that's one of the reasons why I have volunteered my time to serve in those various capacities, because I wanted to know how the system works. Because what we run into when the system don't work and we already got voters that are disengaged, that feel like their vote doesn't count anyway, that's going to further disengage voters. And some of those voters that we've been pushing to get to polls and said vote, 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 because every vote should count, some of those voters are going to become disengaged. And we already have a low voter turnout. That's not what we need. We want voters to know that the system works, but we also want them to not use this as an excuse to disengage from voting.
So you think we should keep this election, however, go back and maybe do a hand count so that everything, or do this and whatever is questionable, if it was the 2 people that voted 2 times, take one of those out.
Correct.
Go back and look at the...
And whatever the numbers are, that is the results of this particular election. What we need to do is we need to let the numbers speak for themselves, because we're getting hyped, to use that term, without knowing the exact results. You've got 5 people there that are supposed to ensure the integrity of the system. And when it comes to reviewing the machines, that's when the state gets involved and come back and look at all of the numbers on the machine there. The state is the only one that can pull the data off the machines. The Board of Election Supervisors cannot do that. But when it comes to those individuals that early voted, those people that mail in ballots, we can verify those votes. And if we verify those votes and the numbers support whatever candidate in this particular election, those are the numbers I feel that we should all go with, because otherwise you're disenfranchising voters, and then you're casting a doubt not only on this election, but voters are going to be casting doubt on every future election that's held in this particular parish.
Aside from your position on the Board of Election Supervisors, you've been a past president of the Bossier NAACP. Do you think this is about a black man winning the sheriff's race, 1 vote over a white man? Is this starting to be a race issue?
People may make it a race issue. It's not, to me, a race issue. Me, it's a voter turnout issue. Mm-hmm. If you look at the numbers, and I think I have the numbers here. From the numbers that I have, we have less than 28% of the individuals voted in this particular election. But Caddo Parish has a population of 153,000 plus individuals that are registered to vote. Of those, 70,699 are Democrat, 43,167 are Republican, 40,125 are others. Those are the registered voters. But we have an election where we only had 43,000 individuals voted. My concern would be those other individuals that did not vote. If you want to change the numbers, don't sit at home on election day. If you want to ensure that your candidate wins, get out on election day and vote. That's why we have a week of early voting to allow individuals to early vote. We have mail-in ballots for those seniors that cannot go to the poll to vote. And we have all those avenues available. And so now people complaining, why didn't you get off your stool on election day for whatever reason and go to the poll and vote? That's the issue for me. You know, when you've got an election, a parish-wide election, and you have less than 30% of the vote, it's not black, it's not white, it's voter participation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so I hear one of the reasons why Nicholson probably did not get the vote, I don't know if this is an excuse, is that a lot of people were at the LSU game, they forgot to do absentee, and they get down to LSU and say, oop, it's election day, and I'm in Baton Rouge.
We've got to quit using those excuses. Those were the same excuse we used during the governor election, because Southern and Grambling had a game, homecoming, LSU had a football game. The fact of the matter is we have put systems in place. Every individual citizen has a week where the polls are open for early voting. So come election day, that's not an excuse that, oh, I forgot to vote because there's a football game. You had a whole week to early vote. And even if there's some reason you're going to be out of town on election day, we have provisions in the code that will allow you to request a mail-in ballot if there's some extenuating circumstances. Don't use the fact that election day happened on a football game and I couldn't vote. Those are just excuses. I don't want to call people lazy, but there's an apathy among voters. And voters do not get upset until the candidate of their choice does not win. Well, if you go out and vote, then you get a chance to determine who you want to represent you.
if this was in Bossier, you think that this should stand one vote for Henry Whitehorn?
Regardless of who the candidate is, if it's one vote, whoever has that one majority vote, that is the candidate that is elected for whatever that position that candidate is running for.